Oh, no.
Welcome to The Know, I'm Ashley.
And I'm Gus.
The biggest game of the year, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, has finally graced console users with its Battle Royale presence thanks to its early access launch on Xbox One this week.
But what was supposed to be a triumphant launch for Microsoft and company might just be a tad marred thanks to reports that the game, well, it doesn't run spectacularly.
That's not great.
Several outlets and gamers have already written some fairly scathing reports about PUBG's performance so far, and it doesn't sound pretty.
And Gus also not happy.
I got some words about it.
On top of all that, creator Brendan Green has made some new comments about Battle Royale copycats, claiming that it's too easy to rip off other games and there should be more protections for developers. We'll just let the irony of that sink in for a second.
Okay, sounds like somebody's feeling a bit salty about Fortnite's console numbers.
Probably.
These new quotes from Green came during a radio interview with Radio 1, in which he lashed out at a couple of copycat developers that he feels have aped his video game.
Which, if you know the story behind PUBG, is more than a little bit ironic, because it's not exactly the first Battle Royale game anyway. Anyway, Green said in the interview that the industry in general has a problem with ripoffs. I want other developers to put their own spin on the genre, not just lift things from our game.
He went on to talk about how in order for the genre of Battle Royale to grow, new things need to be added to the gameplay with interesting spins on the mode. Otherwise, it just gets boring for everybody involved and the genre ultimately dies out.
Okay, so he wants fewer copycats so that the genre does better. It has nothing to do with his game and how it may possibly be being affected by the existence of Fortnite Battle Royale on console. Right. Green went on to talk about how there's little to no legal protection when it comes to game mechanics, saying there's no intellectual property protection in games. In movies and music, there is IP protection and you can really look after your work. In gaming, that doesn't exist yet, and it's something that should be looked into. Some amazing games pass under the radar. Then someone else takes the idea, has a marketing budget, and suddenly has a popular game because they ripped off someone else's idea. I think it's something the industry needs to look into. I feel like we should note, though, that it's not always the case in other industries. I mean, for God's sake, 50 Shades of Grey was a Twilight fanfiction, and it became movies and became great. You just change the names and you're not protected anymore. Yes, Gus.
It's called Battle Royale because of a movie called Battle Royale. I want to point that out.
There is that. And it's like, there's Battle Royale, and then there's Hunger Games. Movies do all, look at all the twin movies. There was like Dante's Peak and Volcano. And you get just like all these doubles that come out all the time.
Green later added that this would help protect the work of artists since games are art. Of course, it's a little bit ironic because PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is hardly the first game of its kind, and Green basically took the format from other projects he made for other studios with the DayZ mod and H1Z1's King of the Kill. And before that, there was the Hunger Games Minecraft mod, of course.
Now, obviously, let's give credit where credit's due. Green did make a couple of those himself, but if the kinds of legal restrictions he's calling for were actually put into place, he might not have been able to do that type of project for 3 different studios.
Beyond that, very few types of games would be allowed to exist in general. One of the reasons gaming has flourished over the last few decades is that you can't copyright game mechanics. Yes, your actual work, the code, the assets, etc., is copyrighted and you can trademark a name or IP, but mechanics themselves are subject to reinterpretation, and games are all the better for it. And he may have also been saying he wants to see new features and iteration.
Which, that I can understand.
Mechanics.
Like, I think that the developers taking an idea and then spinning it and adding on to it is great, but it's also, especially in the current game climate, especially for these types of games, they launch and then they iterate. But just to look at some of the other games that have grown and twisted each other just off the cuff here, but Green probably isn't as concerned about protecting art here as about he's protecting PUBG itself. Now, some of this obviously in response to the many, many clones that are already floating out there and presumably hurting their business. I saw one on Steam, it's a VR one. They almost straight ripped the logo. That was pretty egregious.
That's pretty bad. And the biggest competition, of course, is currently coming from Fortnite. Its early success on console is no doubt a bit of a stinger for Green and company. Not only did it beat PUBG to console, it did it for free and even racked up an impressive player count to boot, which, hell, that's easy. Well, I mean, easier when you're free.
Yeah.
According to Epic Games, Fortnite has surpassed 30 million player mark with more than 1.3 million concurrents across all platforms.
But hey, at least PUBG's finally out on console now and can reestablish its throne, right? I mean, that was the idea, except that unfortunately the general consensus is that the game is kind of buggy and doesn't work great on Xbox.
That's putting it lightly. Digital Foundry, who is basically the authority on all things related to video game tech and performance, wrote a scathing analysis of PUBG's launch version. In it, they say not only that it falls short of expectations, but
Putting it mildly.
they recommend playing Fortnite for a better, more polished version of Battle Royale gameplay.
Ouch. Their write-up has a few choice phrases such as the current build of the game is a long way short of the standards expected from a polished console release, and add that its performance is consistently around the 20 FPS threshold.
They also state in terms of first impressions, PUBG is borderline horrendous, an assault of low quality artwork, jarring pop-in, and disappointing performance. Not that this was a very optimized game on PC to begin with. It's gotten a lot better, but it's still in the works.
Now, fortunately, it does get a boost on Xbox One X 4K resolution and improved draw distance, but generally still falls below 30 FPS, even on the souped up 6 teraflop console, which is a little bit different than Green's claims last week that it would hit 30 FPS on both Xbox One and Xbox One X.
Maybe he meant eventually. They conclude their analysis by saying, we'll be tracking the progress of this title as it evolves, but for now, we'd consider caution before any purchase. And if you want a taste of the Battle Royale experience without the technical drawbacks, Epic Games' Fortnite is well worth a look.
Double ouch.
Yeah, double ouch.
I mean, especially if Fortnite already has a leg up in that it's free. And a lot of those sentiments, though, seem to be echoed by gamers on the Xbox One subreddit. There was a whole thread about Digital Foundry's analysis, and a lot of gamers, it's not an isolated case here and there, it's a lot of people being put off by the game's performance on console with very similar complaints to Digital Foundry's.
Those complaints are also joined by some heavy criticism of the game's controls as well. And yeah, there's something. VG247 writes, a game as reliant on keyboard and mouse controls as PUBG was always going to feel bad on a controller, but there's bad and slightly annoying controls, and then there's insane. Unfortunately, right now, PUBG is firmly in the latter camp.
And not like crazy hot, just like crazy.
Yeah.
Some of the problems that players seem to have are around aiming, which is a very important thing in a shooter. Simple press of the left trigger is actually how you look down your gun sights rather than holding it like you would in most games. Holding the trigger will actually result in an over-the-shoulder third-person view, which makes sense if you've played on PC, kind of, but probably won't make much sense to console players who have had any experience with other shooters. I
had to use Google last night while I was playing my first game to look up how to aim. Microsoft said the controls were innovative. There are also problems with inventory management, with button schemes changing depending on whether or not you're looting or just browsing your own backpack. It's also incredibly slow paced to loot compared to the PC version, but that was probably always going to be an issue.
Of course, with all these complaints, it's important to remember this is an early access title. This is its first time on console. The game barely ran when it was first out months ago on PC as well. There were lots of frame rate issues, other UI improvements, and those came along the way. These ports, they're not going to be a one-to-one comparison right off the bat. It is going to take some time for the console version to catch up.
But given how much Microsoft has been leaning on this game as one of their big exclusives of 2017, none of this is particularly a great look. Many of the people who have heard the hype about PUBG for months probably aren't expecting to get a work in progress when they jump in, especially since it's being given top billing by Microsoft.
Or if it's a work in progress, they would expect it to have progressed further by this point. We've seen plenty of times before this year, first impressions can be very important with gamers. You don't get a second chance out of first impression. So we'll see how development of the game continues and whether or not gamers stick with it or decide if it's not worth their time, or more importantly, if the price tag is worth it when they do have free options available.
What do you guys think about the early reports regarding PUBG's performance? Not a big deal. What about Green's copycat quotes? Let us know in the comments.
And how does Gus feel about the Xbox port?
It's not great. I'm gonna be sticking to the PC. I'm gonna wait. I assume that they'll get it working. I feel like I've played it better at events. I feel like it's run better at events I've seen it at. So I feel like we'll probably see improvement.
Yeah, there are some things about the console version that are an improvement. Like you can equip straight from the ground if you find a piece of equipment. You don't necessarily have to put it into your inventory and then equip it. So there are some nice
I didn't know that.
there. But I don't think that's quite enough to make up for sub 30 FPS. Anyway, for future updates on all the latest releases, including PUBG and how it continues to develop on console, remember to like this video. If you're new around here, subscribe to The Know.
For other studios with the DayZ mod and H1Z1's King of the... Is it King of the Hill or King of the Kill? Yeah, that's what I thought. Basically...
is a little bit different than Green's claims last week that it would hit FPS on both consoles.
You skipped 30.
Really? I just said FPS?
Hit FPS.
What's wrong with you?
They successfully hit FPS.